Oh, hey, Mary. Thanks for coming in.
Ryan, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to help out.
It's nice to see you. It's nice to talk to you one-on-one like this. I don't think we've done this before.
We have not.
And it
no.
must be weird for you to be on the visitor side.
I'm on the other side of the table.
Well,
I can see the CDs.
yeah, I know. I can see the posters and the board. Well, it's nice for you to come in, and I wanted to ask you some questions about your experience as a therapist and, what people can expect if they're going into therapy
Absolutely.
as a visitor or, as a student who wants to get into that field.
Yeah.
And maybe there's some misconceptions about it that you can clear up from your experiences. So I guess first, what's your experience as a therapist and with therapy?
Well, Ryan, I had my own private psychotherapy practice in Arlington for about 25 years. When I was putting the dates together, I realized, wow, that's a long time. I feel old. But I loved being a therapist. I went back for my master's degree in social work at Boston University, and I graduated in 1988. With that degree, and I started working out with a group practice in downtown Boston, and then realized that I really wanted to be in a solo practice, as it's called. Mm-hmm. So I rented an office, took the plunge, and set up my own private psychotherapy practice in Arlington. And I never regretted taking that plunge. It's the most interesting work I can possibly think of, and something that I felt well suited for. Because it's very gratifying. It's interesting, Ryan, when people often find out that I'm a therapist, one of the first things I'll say is, oh, isn't that sad? You hear people talking about their problems all day. And I've never found it to be a sad profession. I've found it to be an extremely gratifying profession because what you actually get to do is be with people and talk to them and listen to them and ask questions in a certain way, and you make them feel better. Mm-hmm. You help them feel better. You help them find the tools that they need in order to solve problems, fix relationships, get into or out of relationships, all kinds of things. So for me, the focus has always been on the beauty and the joy and the gratification of actually being present with somebody and being able to be a helper to them and a witness to their becoming happier people.
Mm-hmm. Did you find that you were able to help the majority of people that came to see you?
Yes. I'm very happy to report that, Ryan. Most of the time, yes. The place you start in therapy, for me anyway, is talking to people about the kind of changes that they want to make in their life. And that followed an approach called solution-oriented therapy, which started coming into practice in the late 80s and 90s. In traditional therapy, often you'd start out by asking somebody, what's your problem? And if you ask somebody what their problem is, what kind of things are they going to start thinking about? Their problems in their life. And that can lead to rumination and, a rabbit hole. But it's a remarkable transition. If you start somebody out from the very first question you ask them is, what do you want to change or be different about how you feel, about your life, about your relationships, about anything? And what do people start thinking about and talking about then? They start talking about their hopes, their desires, and their dreams. Mm-hmm. And then your job as a therapist is to work together with somebody to try and figure out what maneuvers can they make, what changes in the way they think, what can they do? And sometimes just thinking about their hopes and dreams and thinking about strategies for reaching, that's an intervention all by itself. Mm-hmm. And so I'm happy to report that more often than not, yes, I've been able to help people accomplish at least some of those goals that they have for themselves.
Mm-hmm. So I would say that therapy, it sounds like it works almost all the time, or at least a good majority of the time. So what is it that sets people back when it's not being able to help them?
Well, Ryan, in my experience, a lot of it is the right fit between the person and the therapist. I was always happy when people would call me to make an appointment, an initial appointment, and what they called an intake interview. Mm-hmm. I would always spend some time on the phone talking to people about what it is they're looking for, what what they think they want to work on, and what my background was, what my approach is, and I would always encourage people to give people auditions, and most therapists, I'm always happy when people would call, or have an initial meeting with more than one therapist, because to me Well, it's hard to define, but there's a certain kind of rapport I think it's very important for people to feel with the person they're going to be talking to about very intimate, very personal problems and situations and relationships in their life. You need to feel a kind of a trust. You need to feel like there's a naturalness. You need to feel like you can really talk and go deeper as you talk to somebody. That needs to be combined with feeling as though the questions somebody is asking you make sense, that they feel like they're really trying to understand you, and they're taking you in a direction where you're developing further insight into yourself, and hope that you actually can begin to work on and make the changes that you want. So I think that fit is a critical part. To me, I think it's more important than anything else. I mean, you do need to have the skills.
Yes.
You need to have the knowledge base. But there's a lot of people with the knowledge base, and that as important as that is. But the fit is an individual thing. And I think it's good to test that out. And to me, that's part of what is the most healing aspect. Is really feeling like you're seen, you're feeling understood, you can really talk and go deeper into what you need to be able to talk about in order to move closer to the goals that you've set for yourself. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. So you mentioned that everyone has to have a good fit, and your approach, might differ from person to person.
Yes.
So what are the different approaches?
Oh, that's a good question, Ryan. There's so many of them. But I think that you can think about it in terms of two kind of bands of spectrum, continuums. Classically, of course, talk therapy started with Freud. Lie on the couch, free associate. And nobody does that. Well, some analysts probably still do that. But out of that, I think the closest iteration of that is what's called Rogerian therapy, based on the pioneering psychologist Carl Rogers, whose approach was to listen and nod and repeat back to people what they had said. It's become kind of a caricature of therapy. It's one you sometimes see in movies or TV. Oh, Ryan, therapists take a beating in the movies and on TV. And so that's be at one end, I would say, the Rogerian kind of like more passive kind of listening. Not that that can't be helpful for people, it can. But then at the other end, or moving across the spectrum, you have people whom I would describe as being more interactive or interventionist. There's so many tools that we have in the therapy toolbox now. And so along the interactive or interventionist spectrum, you have people who might take a cognitive behavioral approach. And a lot of that means inviting people to study their own thought process, give them worksheets, fill those worksheets out, look together with the therapist then at what are some of the thinking fallacies and how you're approaching yourself with the goal of transforming your relationship with who you are. There are people who will have an educational component to their therapy. They will help people learn how to do mindfulness meditation. There's a whole body of research now about how incredibly helpful even 20 minutes a day of mindful meditation can elevate people's mood. So there's a whole spectrum of different kinds of, I'd call them techniques, Ryan. And how therapists differ is, I think, the extent to which they'll be more interactive and more talkative and actually use some of these techniques in their therapy as opposed to somebody who really sees talking and listening as the primary mode. The other variable that differs is who's in the room. From individual therapy, where it's a one-on-one relationship, to couples therapy, where you have two people, to family therapy, where you bring in, a whole family at times, or group therapy. Support groups. So that's the other variable that differs a great deal. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it sounds like therapy gives people these techniques and these tools to, work on themselves and improve themselves. But does therapy ever offer a cure to people's issues, or is it just giving them the tools they need to, work on it themselves?
Well, that's a good question, Ryan. I think for me, the word cure isn't the word that I myself would use, because cure makes me think of more medical models of illness, or like if you have an infection, you take an antibiotic, and then you're cured because the medicine you take kills the bacteria and it's gone. But in the world of human relationships or mood and emotion, I see it as somewhat different from that. Often the missing factor is sometimes it's an insight. Sometimes it's a question all by itself. Well, why do you think that? Or what made you do that? Or what are you feeling right now? And a lot of the transformative impact of those questions or those techniques is happening inside the mind of the person that you're working with. Sometimes a new insight or just the right question can help somebody really see the solution to the problem. You know, oh, I don't have to put up with that in my relationship.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I really do like that person. I think I could find the initiative to, you know, ask them out.
Yeah.
You know, or, oh, my family wants this, but it's just not right for me, and I need to find the courage to tell them what I need to tell them. And so therapy can help somebody develop the ideas, the insights, the strategies, the tools in order to be able to help themselves.
Yes.
And my view is that's what's really happening through therapy. It is more in the domain of finding the tools that you need in order to help yourself.
Okay, so, you know, as therapy has developed over however many years, I mean, there's been lots of new breakthroughs and new strategies and tools. So are there still being new tools developed today for people?
You know, Ryan, there are. You know, you were kind enough to let me know this is one of the things that you were interested in learning about. And so I had a great time in doing a little bit of research about what are some of the new developments in therapy. Now, backing up a bit, of course, psychotropic drugs were one of the major developments as an adjunct to therapy. And I believe, relating this to your question, that there will be more and better medications available for people for all kinds of mood disorders, attention deficit disorders. I think that progress will definitely continue. But some of the new developments have to do with the new kind of brain scanning technology that we have available to us today that we didn't have 10, 15, 20 years ago. So, for example, one newly developing strategy is called brain spotting.
Oh, okay.
I know. What's that?
Yeah, what is
well,
that?
It turns out it's somewhat related. You may have heard of, it's called EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, which, for example, your brain will record trauma, for example, in certain parts of your brain, in the amygdala. And they've discovered with EMDR, it's a kind of a mechanical movement that you use, tapping back and forth or tracking with your eyes. And that it has the interesting and fascinating effect of sort of shifting around what your brain is doing while you're talking about a memory. And so brain spotting is similar to that. It's using eye movements in order to access parts of your brain and help people basically reprocess some of those memories. One that I found really intriguing, and I wish I could try it myself, is called cognitive control training, which uses tailored computer games, not Grand Theft Auto, but tailored ones that are developed specifically to help people gain a sense of control. It's used for things like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So people can use the computer game and to know when they're starting to lose focus and move back onto focus. And so this sounds fascinating to me. And then there's another one called, I had to write this one down, Brian, so let me consult my notes. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS we'll call it for short,
Okay, yeah.
which sounds very sci-fi, doesn't it? But it's actually non-invasive. It uses some of the same technology that MRI machines do.
Okay.
But it kind of, I guess there's like a big overhead coil that will send magnetic impulses through the part of your brain that regulates emotions,
Okay.
with the idea, again, of helping people shift their mood and to healing effect. So I find these fascinating, the technology alone and what they can do for us. It is kind of science fiction-like. That there's one more that I think, I predict that there will be more and more genetic interventions to help people deal with their moods. There's a whole field of study called epigenetics, which looks at environmental impacts and the effect of trauma that can be passed intergenerationally, not by genetic mutation, but by the way genes are expressed.
Okay.
And I think that that there are no doubt going to be genetic kinds of interventions that can help people who have, in effect, a heritable traumatic response or environmental response from lack of food or, just growing up with malnourishment, I predict, you heard it from me,
Yep. I remember.
that those therapies will come online at some point.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's probably a good prediction. So it sounds like as these things develop, also technology is developing, and we're now in this online age, especially, after COVID, where everything's accessible online, including therapy.
Yeah. So
is online therapy effective? Is it as effective as in person, or do you need that face-to-face time to really make it work?
I spent some time preparing for this, looking up online whether there's research on this, and there is research, because with the pandemic, of course, there's a massive shift. Initially, nobody was meeting face-to-face with clients in their office, so we kind of had to develop the tools of teletherapy and online therapy, and there's a number of studies now that show that it is as effective
Okay.
as in-person therapy. That said, I think there will always be people who prefer just the greater contact of being in a room with somebody and talking to them. But there's plenty of people who prefer, phone or online therapy. If for no other reason than there's no commute involved, Ryan. So it cuts your time.
Yeah.
But yeah, research is trending to show that it can be as effective.
Okay. So, as this online age develops, a lot of stuff becomes free, or there's tools online, YouTube, etc.
Yeah.
So can people use these tools? People that can't afford, to pay a therapist weekly or monthly?
Yeah, people can use them. There's a lot of stuff online. And for people who can't afford therapy, I think it's really important to find something that you can do to help yourself. In fact, there's a couple of online resources I just found out about. There's one called COA, C-O-A. It's short for Coalesce. And it's a mental health gym, is how it's advertised. There's another one called Wondermind, which similarly, the idea is that you can always work on yourself. And there are so many small exercises you can do, from practicing gratitude every day, which will shift your mind into the positive mode, to, I was reading one intervention talking about a worry circle.
Okay.
And what a worry circle is, you literally draw a circle. And if you have something coming up that you're worried about, like a job interview, you put outside the circle, you put everything you have no control over.
Yeah.
Who your interview will be, what they'll think of you, who your competition is. And then inside you put all the things that you have some control over. Go to the website, study the company, be as prepared as you can. And so there are more and more online tools. There's also a self-help section in every library.
Okay.
And I think those can be admittedly of variable quality, but there are some really good ones out there. One that I always recommend is Feeling Good. It's an old one, but it's by David Burns, and it is an approach to cognitive therapy to help people control anxiety and depression.
Okay. So if there's someone listening to this right now that feels like therapy would be a good fit for them and that they would like to go to therapy, where should they look? Where should they start?
Well, there's a site that I have recommended to people, and it's the Psychology Today Therapy Finder, which is online, and it's organized by people's geographic location, which is, let's face it, a deal breaker for most of us. Location, 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 not just in real estate, but in yoga classes and therapy as well, I think. And they also will tell you what insurances people take. They will also tell you if somebody has openings in their practice right now, or whether they have a waiting list, or they're accepting new clients.
Okay.
And also people's approaches, what kind of therapy they do, whether they work with individuals, couples. So that is one source that I have found it to be very useful and very accessible for people.
Okay.
But I do want to add, because there's a new hotline that came into existence in July of this year. And it's for people who might be having a crisis. It could be suicidal. It doesn't have to be suicidal. It could be themselves, or it could be somebody else that they're worried about. And I just want to take the opportunity to promote this for anybody who might be hearing this. All you have to do is dial 988.
Okay.
988. It's a mental health crisis number that's staffed 24/7.
Okay.
So don't wait. Don't feel as though there's no one you can talk to. You can always, if you're in crisis, or if you think somebody you know is in crisis, you don't even have to be sure about it. Just call 988 and somebody will help you.
Okay, 988. I will remember
988.
that. Hopefully I'll never need it, but it's
Hopefully.
always good to remember.
It's good to know about, though.
And lastly, when people are looking for therapists, maybe it's their first time and they're just trying to get into this because they think it's what they need. How do they know what approaches will work for them? What can they look for? Maybe the therapist knows if they're a fit, or does the person have to determine if it's what's right for them?
That's a great question, Ryan, because as we've been talking about, there's so many different approaches and more approaches being developed every day. I think that a useful thing to do is if you have a therapist name, call them up and say that you're interviewing therapists and you want to find somebody who can help you, and then tell them a little bit about the kinds of things that you want to work on. And then ask them, have you had people who've been working on these things in your practice before?
Yeah.
And how do you usually try and help people who are trying to work on this particular kind of goal, or trying to, accomplish this kind of, solve this problem or meet this kind of goal, and then see what they say. And if it makes sense to you, you may feel like, do you feel like they listened to you? Did they take the time to listen to you? Did they,
Yes.
make you feel understood? And if those are thumbs up, then go from there.
Okay.
But always remember that you can try other people as well.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in, Mary. I definitely learned a lot. And I hope you had a little bit of fun researching this. So,
I absolutely did, Ryan. I surely did.
well, if anyone needs any help, if you have a crisis or anything, remember 988. And if you're looking for a therapist, go back, listen for the website names, and I'm sure you can find someone that will be helpful to you.
There you
Bye-bye,
go.
everyone.
Thanks, Ryan. Bye.